Okay, I think we can begin the meeting today. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our technical workshop meeting for February 16th, related to the Senate Bill 1121 needs assessment. I really appreciate that everyone joined us today. Justin, can you go to the next slide, please?
Certainly.
So again, welcome everyone for joining us in today's meeting. Next slide. I'm going to go over the agenda very briefly. So again, just welcoming everyone. Then I will switch over to Paul to provide some opening remarks this morning, and then have Justin Hall explain some of the basic webinar logistics that we have for today's meeting. We're very excited to begin our technical analysis discussion, which will be led by NCE Linda Pierce on team, and Margot Yap is also here. They're helping us prepare the needs assessment that is due January 1st, 2025. So we'll get into the information that we received thus far from our transportation stakeholders, from the regional transportation plans, and also really begin our discussion on the projected transportation plan. Then we'll have a Q&A and wrap up the next steps at the end of the meeting. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Paul to provide a few remarks. Next slide, please.
Yeah, hi everyone. This is Paul Glozewski. I'm the Chief Deputy Director here at the California Transportation Commission. I just wanted to take a moment to thank everyone for attending today's workshop. We really appreciate your time and your input in this effort. Today's workshop is going to provide the opportunity to analyze and discuss the 10-year revenue projections for the assessment and assess the available information that has been gathered thus far for the 10-year transportation needs. The workshop will lay the foundation for the needs assessments analysis and illustration of how projected revenues are not keeping pace with the state's multimodal transportation infrastructure needs. And this work is really critical. I think, as you all know, it's going to support policy recommendations centered around solving the problem of our declining transportation revenue, particularly from the gas tax. This is critical as we work together to identify solutions that comprehensively address our state's complex transportation needs. This work can only be done successfully if we all work together with all of you, our stakeholders, our partner agencies who plan, fund, and deliver infrastructure projects and represent a diverse array of geographies and communities throughout California. Your partnership is vital to ensuring we accurately capture essential transportation infrastructure and operational needs, as well as revenues, while also clearly conveying how the transition to zero-emission vehicles, which will greatly benefit our planet, but will unfortunately negatively impact our fuel tax revenues and our ability to fund projects and deliver accessible, resilient projects, transit projects, active transportation, and roadway projects. So once again, thank you all for joining us today. We couldn't do this work without you, and I'll turn it back to Francis.
Thanks, Paul. Next slide, please, Justin. I'm going to turn it over to you to briefly discuss our webinar logistics.
Great. Thank you, Francis. Welcome to the Senate Bill 1121 Technical Workshop. The CTC exists to make transportation planning, funding, and policy more understandable and accountable. Our meetings take place in diverse locations around the state so that commissioners and staff can hear directly from our stakeholders around California. We now offer hybrid and fully virtual meetings to allow our stakeholders to participate more fully, no matter where you are. The meeting agenda is located on our website at www.catc.ca.gov. Closed captioning is available on this Zoom meeting. Please select the Show Captions tab at the bottom of your screen. There are a number of language options there to choose from. Any document the CTC creates can be translated into any language you need. Simply email us at ctc@catc.ca.gov. We will have them returned to you as quickly as possible. For all our meetings, we encourage interaction with our stakeholders. There will be opportunity for questions and comments throughout this meeting. For those attending via Zoom, you should see the webinar control panel likely located on the bottom of your screen. There you'll find the raise hand and Q&A tabs. We encourage you to use the raise hand feature as soon as we reach the item to give the system time to acknowledge you. Commission staff will let you know when it's your turn to make your comment. Alternately, you may use the Q&A tab to submit your comment or question. Commission staff will read that on your behalf. And as a reminder, each registered attendee is provided a unique link or phone number to access this webinar. These should not be shared with other applicants or participants, and this creates confusion for staff when making comments. Please do your best to be concise. Please make sure that your comments add new information. If you agree with the comments of a previous speaker, simply make that statement. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Justin. And now I will turn it over to Linda from the NCE team to start the overview of the information we've gathered from the Extended Fiscal Needs Survey. Linda?
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And good morning, everyone. You can go ahead to the next slide, please. And so couple back, I guess it was in November, December timeframe, a survey was sent to the metropolitan planning organizations and the regional transportation planning agencies and other counties that aren't represented by one of those to kind of ask questions related to the regional transportation plan. Are you developing one? Do you have one? Are you developing it? Are you modifying it? You know, that type of information. And then we also provided, or Francis also provided, a spreadsheet that had a couple of different tabs in it. One of them was to identify the 10-year multimodal transportation needs. And then I'll show you the categories in the next couple of slides. Also asked for agencies to provide a 10-year revenue projection, as well as there was an AB 744 tab that Francis had added to the spreadsheet, just so that she could minimize the number of times we had to, go out to and reach out to the MPOs and the RTPAs for questions. So I'm not going to be discussing the AB 744 at all. I'm just going to be hitting the multimodal transportation needs and the revenue projections as part of this. The other thing that going into this, and you'll see in the next two slides why I say this, the information that was requested is quite detailed. It wasn't just give us how many, billions of dollars of needs you have versus how many billions of dollars of revenue you have. We actually asked participants to break them down by roadway, by complete streets, by all these different types of categories. And so we also understood, though, that some of the agencies would not be able to provide that level of detail. But it was one of those, let's ask for the moon, and let's be able to accept something in between those two. Next slide, please, Justin. And so getting into the needs categories, and so here's where we're getting down to the details and the specifics, and I won't read through all these, but you can see the level that we wanted. So it was about roads and streets and highways and transit operations. So it's really getting down to the nitty gritty as much as we could to be able to better categorize, going into the future, where's the predominant needs by the facility type. Next slide, please. And I should suggest, and I don't know, Francis, if you want anybody to interrupt as I go, or you want to hold questions to the end.
We can hold questions to the end.
Okay. Perfect. And so on the revenue side, this is where it really kind of gets down, is we really wanted to kind of have an idea of where was the revenue coming from. Is it federal? Is it state? Certainly, there's a lot of local. There's, Senate Bill 1, all these different locations or all these different sources of revenue, and to be able to, again, to break down how those all look and where the amount of money is coming from each one of these different sources. Next slide, please. So to date, we've received, I think there are 13 here. I didn't count them, but I think there's 13 to 14. And so we've gotten, from the different areas, probably we need another 20, I think. I think there's 33 MPOs, RTPAs in California, and that's my calculation. I'm not sure if that's the right number, but it's closer to 30 than it is to 10 for sure. So we still haven't got half the representation. Ideally we get more. Ideally we get all of them. That would be really beneficial to help better quantify, obviously, the needs and the revenue that's coming into the state. So at least what I'm going to show you in the next couple of slides will be a summary of the responses received from these agencies. All right, next slide, please. So this is just so I broke it down rather than by individual area. I just broke it down by the categories of the needs. And so you can see transit operations is the largest amount that is needed. And if you sum up all these different areas, it's about $549 billion. Interesting, as you go through, you can kind of, go down this graph, and you can see that, there's asset systems and safety, and, down at the bottom, there's local roads, complete streets. So it's just at least what's been identified by those agencies. And I think I got a couple of arrows if you click on there, Justin.
Is it just hitting next, Linda?
Yeah, it's just hitting next. Thank you. I'm sorry. And so really what I wanted to point out is that specifically for transit and for passenger rail, there is an operations piece, but in every other category shown on this graph, it's not operations. It's actually, the cost for repair, the cost, for the doing rather than the operation. So that needs to be distinguished to really show what that impact is. So if we take away transit operations, passenger rail operations and maintenance is combined. So I really can't separate out the operations piece of that. But at least if we take out transit operations, we're looking at 394, almost $400 billion needed statewide, or at least in these regions, I should say. So, next slide, please. So then I wanted to kind of take out, where is the proportion of this going? And so I of all those categories, I kind of put them into, local roads, highways, rail, transit, demand and system management, and then there's this other category which captures everything beyond these six. And then really just kind of, again, this is just to show that a lot of the money or a good proportion of the needs are for local roads, followed by transit, highway, rail, this other category of everything else, and then the demand. So again, it's just a graphic just to show the dispersion of the needs across the facilities. So next slide, please. And then what I wanted to do is take out transit operations and give a look at it a little bit. And again, from the agencies that provided information, MTC has the largest of the pie of the needs for transit operations. SCAG would be second, then everybody else is about 4% of this $154 billion needs on the transit operations side. I don't think that's a surprise, considering everything that's being covered by the MTC. But certainly, it's again, I'd like to have a couple more regions respond to the survey so we can, see if that pie is just dispersed between these between the MTC and SCAG, or if there's others playing as well, which I would assume there will be. Next slide, please. So then what I decided to do here is to just show the revenue again by the different factors. Interesting, other local kind of comes into the largest piece of where the revenue is coming from. And that other local isn't really defined. We didn't ask for them to break down other local into different categories. And then, of course, the sales tax, then other tax, I think that's other federal, that third line now should be other federal. But you can kind of see the breakdown again. And of course, down at the bottom there's no money associated with transit-related funding. At least nothing as of yet is being brought into the state. Again, this is about a $304 or $305 billion as far as the money coming in. And then go ahead and next slide. If you look at the needs, again, taking out the transit operation, we're looking at about a $94 billion shortfall. And then if you put transit operations back in, the shortfall between the needs and the revenue is about $250 billion. So again, pretty substantial shortfall, just the way things are today. This isn't discussing anything else that could be impacting us in the future, but certainly shows that there's a pretty significant issue looming. Next slide, please. So I really, if there's anybody has any questions or comments, absolutely go ahead and ask those questions. Certainly if there's other things we should be looking at, that would be a good thing to respond to. So anything that you can do or anything that you see that maybe could be expanded on would be greatly appreciated. So what we're going to do is hopefully additional responses come from other agencies that have yet to respond, and so we can actually add them to the discussion. And certainly though, moving forward for the complete needs report is going ahead and starting to look at the various existing documents that we have. These are just a few that I have readily access to, but I'm sure there's others. I know there's regional plans as well. But going into it and looking at the breakdown of needs versus the revenue and pulling that all together for like I said, for the complete needs report. Next slide, please. I think I'm on to the next one. So I don't know, Francis, if you want to stop here or pause and ask any questions, take any questions.
Yeah, I think we can open up for any questions that people may have on what you've presented so far.
Great, thank you, Francis. Just a reminder to our attendees, you can use the virtual hand raise feature or submit a written question to the Q&A tab. Give them a few moments. Not seeing any requests to comment at this time.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Justin. All right, so this I think is the little bit more the exciting portion of this workshop. Looking at and diving into the ZEV revenue impact studies. And I need to recognize Charlene Montgomery Dunn, who actually was the person that put this together, and she is online and attending, but I'll be going ahead and giving that presentation. And obviously, if you guys ask a tough question, I'll have to defer to Charlene to answer. So, but we'll just go through it. All right, next slide, please. And kind of what I want to do is kind of get everybody on the same page. So I've got a couple of slides that kind of talk about the whole greenhouse gas and the impact or the presence of ZEVs and how we got to where we are today with looking at these impacts as far as the revenue is concerned. So back in 2021, there's actually a little graph that was developed, and this is from the the ARB's website there on the lower left-hand corner, you can see. But it was kind of identified that there was 381 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent floating around, and you can see where all the major chunks of these carbon dioxide equivalents came from. And so it's kind of just they were able to quantify it by industry, by transportation, residential farming, electricity, and I don't think it's a surprise that transportation is certainly the largest contributor to the carbon dioxide equivalents, with about 39% of the whole. And of those, the majority of that is for passenger cars and trucks, for light duty vehicles. So it is the people parked on the freeways and cities and towns and everything that are kind of generating the carbon dioxide equivalent. So again, it's not, I don't think this is a surprise to anybody, but it's always nice to kind of have that breakdown to see where they are, that it isn't really, the farming or the industry that's doing it. It is cars and trucks. Next slide, please. Also that just a kind of a little bit about the greenhouse gas reduction and where we've been in the past. So certainly back in 2006, Nunez with Assembly Bill 32 really set the first emission targets, trying to hit the 1990 level by 2020. And the graph on the right can actually show you that the actual emissions is well below, and so that's always a good thing. Then in 2016, Pavley did Senate Bill 32, which really just extended those targets to a level of 40% below the 1990 level by 2030. And then most recently, in 2022, Assembly Bill 1279 extended those targets to 2045 with a carbon neutrality, which is quite an aggressive goal, as we know. A lot of industry are actually trying to reach that goal as well. But I think one thing that is important to note is while the actual emission is below these targets, if the current trend continues, the targets will not be able to be met. So if you kind of can draw a little bit of a line, I actually tried to draw a line, but the line, it depends on how you're looking at it. But certainly you can see there was a pretty nice drop between 2019, 2020 or so. And that drop needs to continue at a pretty good rate to stay below the target line. If the trend doesn't adjust, then obviously those targets will not be met. So things will need to change to be able to make sure that these targets or these goals are met. Right, next slide, please. So in 2022, back in December, CARB did send out a scoping plan and identified that there's a reference scenario which kind of uses the existing policies and trends. And so the graph on the right, you can kind of see how the amount of GHG emissions declines from where we are 2021 for this one out to 2045. And so there is a drop using existing policies and trends. However, they also said, you know what, we can do something a little bit more aggressive. So we're going to continue to do our existing policies and trends, but we're going to add a few new efforts to help us achieve those goals and really drop the GHG emissions down to more tolerable or acceptable levels. And so really what this means is that if we bop back over to the bullets on the left, that looking at getting the light duty vehicle sales to be all ZEVs by 2035, so all cars and trucks and SUVs. And then looking at also getting the new medium and heavy duty vehicle sales are all ZEVs by 2040. And then looking at getting the vehicle miles traveled decreased. So getting people either into some type of transit or rail or carpool or something to get them to reduce the number of vehicle miles traveled, drop that down to 25% below 2019 by 2030, and then 30% by 2045. So again, some pretty aggressive impacts to get those GEG levels down a little bit more than where they are, or to be able to ensure that we're going to be able to meet those targets, I should say. Next slide, please. So there is also back in August of 2022, CARB did have an advanced Clean Cars 2, which actually gets back into a little bit more of getting passenger cars, trucks, and SUVs to 16% in 2023, and again 100% in 2035. So really trying to get at the root of the impact that the light duty vehicles have on GHG production. And then, of course, in 2023, the annual sales were actually 25% were ZEV vehicles, which, according to this projection, would be about a year ahead of schedule. And then, of course, I think as we dive into further evaluation and analysis, is can this rate be kept, and if it's not kept, what happens? What are the impacts? In meeting those GHG goals. Right, so next slide, please. Then just a little bit more in 2023, the CARB has an advanced clean fleet. So now we're talking about buses and trucks and those that FedEx and UPS and garbage trucks and everything else. And so there's a series of groups, depending on the type of group it is. Again, one is kind of the light duty, so it's like UPS, the FedEx. The group 2 is getting into more of the work trucks, buses with 3 axles, so getting into the little bit larger larger vehicles. And then group 3 is really getting into the bigger semi tractor trailer type combination trucks and specialty vehicles. And so you can kind of see here that this is just a breakdown of, the 10%, 25, 50, 75, and 100% being ZEVs and the year associated with that percent. So again, everybody is on board by 2042. All vehicles coming into California, within California, are going to be ZEV. Certainly the targets for group 1 is in 35 and the group 2 is in 2039. But still, it's by 2042, everybody is ZEV. And so it kind of, again, it's an aggressive approach, but certainly is one that helps to meet the ZEV or the GHG targets. Next slide, please. So now that we're kind of hopefully on the same page and trying to keep all these different regulations and requirements in check, there is a number of studies that have been conducted over the last year or so, a couple of years maybe. One was done by the California Department of Transportation as part of the statewide local roads and streets needs report. Charlene actually developed a ZEV estimate. So we have that one from 2022, I believe the analysis was done. So a little bit dated. We can show you those results. Certainly the more recently released is the Legislative Analysis Office provided a report. The CTC has actually been working on doing a analysis as well. And then we are anticipating a report from the Mineta Transportation Institute. Says anticipated in February, but since we're halfway through February, a little bit more than halfway through February, I'm not sure it's going to be February or not, but as soon as it comes in, we'll be able to take a look at what the MTI has done on this related topic. So we're going to look at least at the top 4, a little bit more dive into each one of them. I got just a couple slides on each one. Again, just to kind of illustrate or demonstrate what it is they're looking at and then the results that they found. So next slide, please. So Caltrans did a study. They're looking at using their 2024 Transportation Improvement Fund estimate. So you got to have a start where you're gonna shoot from. And this was adopted in 2023 by the Commission. And their specific analysis looked at gasoline consumption using 3 scenarios. One is using the 2022 fund estimate, the 24 fund estimate, and then they decided to pick a baseline and looking at static EV and fuel economy, so things don't change. So the fuel economy and the zero emissions are going to stay the same after fiscal year 22-23. They are going to use, they did use the information contained in the CARB's emission factor database. And then there's assumptions in there for vehicle miles traveled, fuel economy, fuel type, and vehicle type. So they kind of did a combination of, we're going to use our funds, and then we're going to go ahead and follow the CARB recommendations, but we're going to say everybody changes the same after today. So they hold everything the same. So there's no increase in ZEVs. There's no change in fuel economy. So there's a, couple of assumptions that need to be considered through the process there. All right, next slide, please. So this is the chart that was developed, and so the orange line is the 2024 fund estimate. The blue line is the 2022 fund estimate, and then the gray line is nothing changes after 2023. So the ZEVs we have today are the ZEVs we have in the future, and so you can see how those lines change. And as you would expect, the gray line is gonna go ahead and increase because we're still getting sales from gas and everything, but the divergence of the blue line and the orange line really are showing that we've got about a $1.3 billion shortfall compared to the baseline scenario. So compared to that gray line, by 2028, 29, we'll have looking at having a revenue loss of $1.3 billion. And there's a whole bunch of details in some of this information, and obviously I'm just giving you a kind of a highlight here. But then when we go into providing this information, we'll be much more detailed and explicit with what we're showing and what we're sharing. So we'll get all the details that go into this analysis as well. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so back for the statewide local needs roads and streets report that we prepared. We went ahead and used the Advanced Clean Cars 2 ZEV schedule. So that was which was established by CARB. However, we're limiting it only to the light duty vehicles, so the cars, trucks, and SUVs. Looking at the contribution of gas vehicles is about $281 per year. And that's based on a gas rate, an average vehicle miles traveled, and then a gas mileage rate is how we came up with that $281 per year. In comparison, the ZEVs are looking at a road improvement fee, which was part of SB1, and their fee is only $108 per year, based on that road improvement fee. So if you next slide, please. So if you do the quick math, that the ZEVs are actually looking at a third of the conventional cost of a gas vehicle. So there's where that and obviously that's where the impact comes from. All right, next slide, please. All right, so if you go ahead and take that and you're looking at the loss in gas revenue as the number of ZEVs increase, and so again, that's that same line that I was showing before, that green line, and then the blue bars are the loss in gas tax revenue. By the time that we get to 2035, we estimated that was about a $1.5 billion decrease in gas tax of that impact. And next slide, please. Then the next one, I've only got the LAO and then one more. So the LAO came out with their report, again, using a 2022, the CARB scoping plan scenarios. And here you can see where the scoping plan is an aggressive ZEV transition. So we're going to hit ZEVs, the portion of ZEVs are going to be 85% by 2045. There's a light duty vehicle miles travel reduction, and they also assume that the fuel efficiency of gas vehicles obviously is going to increase. The reference scenario in the LAO analysis says we're going to be a little bit more conservative on the transition to ZEVs with only 65% by 2045, going to use the current policies and practices. So where we don't see this reduction in VMT, or we don't see a change in the percent of everything. And though, however, we do also see a fuel efficiency increase. So the gas vehicles are going to get a little bit more fuel efficient, which again, I think is totally conceivable to happen. All right, if we go next slide, please. There's a little bit more detail probably, but it kind of breaks down the excise gas tax. So from gas vehicles, the diesel taxes are looking at the excise tax as well as the sales tax. And so on the gas tax side, the difference between the reference scenario and then the scoping plan, you can see there's a couple $2 billion difference or difference in revenue. The diesel, you kind of have to add the lines together, but it's a similar decrease by the time we get to the end of the chart here. You can see there actually is a decrease in revenue from diesel, but it's just kind of split into the two taxes. And then the far right image kind of brings it all together and shows that the reference scenario and the scoping plan scenario, again, are showing a drop of about $4.4 billion from current levels. We'll see in the decrease in the gas tax with the increase in ZEVs. All right, next slide, please. Then my last one is the CTC revenue scenario projection. Similar here on the left is the baseline, pretty much is the status quo scenario. So where we are today is how we move into the future. This is looking at both the gas tax, the diesel excise and sales tax, as well as the road and transportation improvement fees. The annual revenue increase, and so we're looking at a 3% inflation. How the above the, so it's a 3% inflation each year above the current revenue. And also looking at the CARB vehicle increase, which is information obtained from CARB. And then looking at before, you can see that I showed in the analysis that we did for the local roads and streets, we were showing that there's about that the ZEVs pay about a third of what the average conventional vehicle pays. Well, in this one, the ZEV annual fee was assumed to be the average value of the conventional vehicles. And so obviously that implies that there's going to be an increase in the tax imposed onto the ZEV vehicles. And then we went ahead with the fuel efficiency consistent, so it's going to be 25 miles per gallon. So there is no change in fuel efficiency over the time evaluated. So 25 miles per gallon for light and duty vehicles, and then 20 miles per gallon for medium and heavy duty vehicles. But again, that's kind of a constant thing, which back with the LAO report, they actually showed that they increased or improved the efficiency. Well, this one, the CTC analysis holds it steady over the time evaluated. The other scenario is to achieve the GHG targets. So again, looking at the CARB Advanced Clean Cars 2, assigning a fee for the diesel, the gas, as well as the road improvement fee. And again, similar to the baseline, we're applying a 3% inflation over the analysis period. In the achieve the GHG target scenario, it does include a improved fuel efficiency. So there's a rate that was used to improve it over the 25 miles per gallon for the light duty, or the 20 miles per gallon for the medium and heavy duty vehicles. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so here's a couple. So baseline scenario is on the left, the GHG target on the right. And so you can see this is a breakdown between gas, the diesel, the ZEV road improvement, as well as the transportation improvement fees. So you can kind of see the breakdown of those over the 10-year analysis period. Then as you get to the target scenario, where you've got, improved fuel efficiency, you're meeting the ZEV goals, your VMT is changing. So you can see the gas price of the kind of the lighter brown color is going down over the years with the reduction of the VMT. The diesel's holding about the same across the period. Certainly the road improvement fee is increasing with the ZEVs over time, as well as the TIF looks to be increasing with time as well, slightly. But the bottom line is, if you compare these two, there's about a $6.8 billion reduction between the target scenario and the baseline scenario by the time we get to 2035-36 fiscal year. All right, next slide, please. So so taking all four of those, and you really can't take them and put them onto one chart, and they are not the same. There's different assumptions. There's different years of which they evaluated it. And so one of the things that we need to be doing moving forward is kind of taking a look at, so we can't use all four, and when we get the Mineta, we can't use all five to summarize the impacts, the revenue impacts moving forward in the complete needs report. So I kind of envision trying to do somewhat of a comparison in some way, and say that, hey, the two of the three or three of the four all kind of estimate similar reductions in revenue. So we'll go ahead and move forward with that one as far as, hey, here's what we think, or here's the analysis that we're going to base it on. And some of the questions that we have is looking at, what factors do you include in the baseline scenario? Do we just assume today nothing changes moving forward? Do we take a look at trying to meet the ZEV goals? Just kind of, there's so many things that impact what that, how many billion that is going to be in 10 years. So it's really kind of looking for some guidance from the working group, any ideas that you have. Certainly we can run scenarios to be able to make an assessment. And I envision for the complete needs report, we will. It won't be just one, because there's no way to accurately figure out what's going to happen in the future. So I kind of see it as like, we're gonna pick a baseline, and here's what the baseline is, clearly establish what those assumptions are, and then maybe one or two scenarios. We'll say, hey, if all of a sudden ZEVs take off, what happens if the ZEVs don't change? I mean, there's a lot of different ways we can draw this line. So looking again to see if there's any comments from the group on any ideas you have, any things to investigate. And again, are we comparing it to a baseline? Do we want to use current revenue levels? Do we want to use, what about maintenance? All these things will have an impact. So any ideas, comments, suggestions from the group would be welcome.
Thanks, Linda. I think we have some questions in the Q&A. We'll go through those first and let everyone kind of percolate and coming up with any additional questions or comments based on the revenue projections you just went through. How does that sound?
Perfect.
Okay. Justin,
I got one more slide in there.
Okay.
Francis. Yeah, so like I said, we're just gonna, go ahead and continue looking at these different assessments. We're patiently waiting for the Mineta report to come available, and certainly, like I noted, we do want to start doing some type of comparison, looking at the assumptions, coming down to a 10-year outlook, because again, some of those went short of 10 years or went beyond 10 years. So we want to do that, and certainly, as I said, being able to have a discussion or illustrate maybe the impact of the rate of ZEV adoption, I think would be an interesting thing to dive into a little bit as well. So thank you.
All right, Justin, would you be able to just read out some of the questions, and I think I can answer some of them in the chat or Q&A.
Certainly. Yeah. Thank you, Francis. Yeah, we did receive a few written questions during this time. First one comes from Yesenia Perez. She's asking about the survey questions from earlier. She writes, curious if any of the survey questions specifically asked about multi or heavy duty vehicle electrification, or under what needs category that information would have been captured under.
Yes, Yesenia, this was not asked. Multi or heavy duty vehicle electrification was not part of the survey question. What we asked for was information from the regional transportation planning agencies and what those transportation needs are. And so, again, that wasn't asked specifically in the survey question. If it comes under any category, maybe the other, but that might be better explored through our Senate Bill 671 effort on the freight analysis. So Laura, I don't know if you have anything to add in that front.
Francis, I'm good with that answer. I do have a quick request though for folks who are typing their questions into the chat. Would you mind indicating like which agency or organization you are with? That'll just help us keep track of who's who.
Okay, thank you. Should I move on to the next question?
Yes, please.
Okay, great. Next one comes from Mike Woodman. He asks, does the transportation percentage of emissions include aviation industry? And if not, how are those being addressed or considered?
So the transportation emissions does include aircraft or aircraft or the aviation, but it's not clear what that breakdown is. So that would be something that we'd need to check into.
Thank you. The next question comes from Rob Ball. They ask, did the analysis of revenue consider reduction in VMT per vehicle over time?
So the LAO analysis did consider VMT reduction, and the CTC analysis did not. But I know that I believe it's being modified as we're starting to go down the road on that one.
Thank you. Rob Ball had a follow-up question. How about decrease in VMT through increased telecommuting?
That I think, I mean, it's yes, but I don't know that you can break it down by why. So all we can note is that there is a reduction in VMT.
Thank you. Next comment comes from Greg Herner. They write, it seems misleading to use a higher ZEV road improvement fee in the CTC revenue scenario when the administration has not proposed increasing the fee and the legislature has no proposal.
Yes, so the CTC analysis assumed the ZEV road improvement fee was equivalent to the gas diesel only for the baseline scenario. So essentially they're paying the same as the gas diesel for the revenue estimate.
Thank you.
And great. Oh, to add to that, one of the focal points for this needs assessment is also to discuss what needs to happen to sort of fill the gap between our growing transportation needs and our decline in revenue. So as we move towards working on developing our policy recommendations later this year, there will be a lot of discussions around like what that, how to basically fill that gap, what needs to be done.
Thank you. Next comment also comes from Greg Herner. They write, do strongly support using the CARB assumptions and adoption schedule. This is mandated by the state as part of the state implementation plan, and it is critical to understand the totality of the impact. Next one
Thank
comes.
you
Oh,
for your comment. Greg. No, sorry.
no problem. Next one comes from Mary Reyes. They ask, even following the passage of SB 1, it is apparent that current revenues are not sufficient to meet the needs for local streets and roads. Is it possible to demonstrate the projected transportation needs and not just compare it to the baseline? Mary Reyes, LA County.
I believe it's possible. Linda, correct me if it's wrong. I mean, so part of it is as we explore like how we want to present the information, we can look at what like what we're including in our revenue projections and what that looks like in I guess different scenarios or with specific information. But I can circle Linda, any additional thoughts you have there?
You know, I think it's totally possible to show that. Yeah.
Thank you. The next question comes from Joshua Pack, Butte County Public Works. They ask, any consideration about the additional weight of ZEV vehicles compared to their gasoline-powered counterparts and the cumulative impacts these heavier vehicles may have on pavement conditions and increased maintenance costs?
Yeah, so there is a increased weight for the battery unit on the heavy vehicles. I mean, so this is not cars, trucks, and SUVs. This is the buses, the delivery trucks, the tractor trailer, semi trailers. So totally aware of that weight increase. Does it impact the roadway? Absolutely. The amount of weight applied to a tire or to an axle is kind of an asymptotic impact. And it needs to be, so doubling the axle weight will cause a lot of damage to the roadway. It'll have problems potentially in some of the smaller bridges. And so it is an issue, but knowing full well something's going to have to happen to balance that existing legal load limits with the potential loss in cargo, not necessarily volume, but certainly weight, just to compensate for the added weight of the battery packs. So yes, there is an impact, and it's difficult to capture. And again, it's one of those things that we can certainly look at the weight of the vehicle coming in, but considering that vehicle manufacturers still have to meet existing legislation for load limits, it's just a matter of making the weight of what they can carry is going to be lower. So they still have to meet those legal loads.
Thank you, Linda. And that concludes all questions or comments. Oh, wait, we just got one submission and from Rob Ball once again. They write, it appears less than a quarter of revenue is from diesel taxes. However, HT trucks account for 8% of highway maintenance needs. Can we consider a ZEV truck tax structure that incentivizes lower weights per axle or tires to reduce wear and tear and overall highway maintenance costs?
Rob, that's a great comment. And I think as we head into developing our policy recommendations, and we intend to hold a workshop specifically around policy recommendation development. I think these are sorts of questions and comments that we will be looking for to figure out like what we want to include in the final full needs assessment report.
Thank you. He issued a quick correction, 80% of highway needs, not 8%. But that, I am not seeing any other questions or comments at this time.
Okay. And if anyone has additional questions or comments, you can feel free to email me directly or Laura or our NCE team. Our contact information will be at the end of the slide. So I will ask Justin to move to the next slide. So this is sort of our tentative timeline right now for the development of the needs assessment. And I say tentative because I haven't figured out specific dates yet for our policy workshop meetings. But in the winter, oh, sorry, I should have updated that. We did adopt the Senate Bill 1121 interim report, and that was submitted in January. The full needs assessment today was the kickoff for really the development on the technical information that we're pulling into the report, getting feedback from the stakeholders, the preliminary roll-up of the transportation needs that we have received to date from our transportation stakeholders. And again, we kind of went through the various revenue projections that are available to us currently and what that looks like. Just so you know, we're going to continue having just general ongoing stakeholder work group meetings, but we will also have some specific meetings to focus on any follow-up questions or discussions related to both the technical workshops and when we do the policy recommendations as well. And that will be in the form of office hours. And I will be sending out that information early next week after we wrap up our second technical workshop. In the spring, we anticipate hosting our policy recommendation workshops, virtual and in person. So far that we've come up with, we'll continue providing updates at the commission meetings when necessary. And in the summer, we are going to get ready to begin the development of the complete needs assessment report after working with our stakeholders and meeting with them on developing the report. I think critically, a lot of us are very interested in what those recommendations will be as we submit to the legislature. Again, updates at the commission meetings when necessary, and we anticipate releasing the draft in the fall for public comment, but in the summer, we're really hoping to get additional feedback on, working draft. So I think more explicitly, just sort of how we envision presenting this at our commission meetings and when we're adopting them. We're hoping October to present the draft and then in December adopt the final. It's very similar to how the interim report was initially laid out in terms of its time. So that's what we have for the tentative needs assessment report timeline. And then next slide, please, Justin. Here is the contact information for all of us here. Again, if you have any specific questions or comments you wanted to follow up on, feel free to email any of us and we will get back to you on that. So Laura, I think wrap up the next steps.
I'm happy to. Okay, so thank you everyone for your time on this Friday morning, for your great questions, your engagement, and being so willing to share information with us. I wanted to just note that we will be posting this PowerPoint presentation as a PDF on the Commission's Needs Assessment Program webpage, so you can access it in the future. We will be offering the same kickoff workshop next week on Wednesday, February 21st at 1 p.m. In case there's anyone, who missed this and needs to tune in and get caught up. Don't go to it if you've already been on this one, because it'll be the exact same thing. And then I did just want to emphasize that Francis will be setting up some office hour time slots so that we can continue the conversation with agencies about revenue and needs. So please stay tuned for some scheduling emails on that. And I think with that, we can wrap.
All right. Thank you, everyone. And have a great weekend, and we'll be in touch.